And right now, Paulina Jeziorek and Fanny Truel, sorry, will talk a little bit about community gardens in Polish context, but also in relation to the context of Brussels. And then we will have time for discussion and after the break, a kind of little workshop exercise to digest and discuss about everything that we experienced and hear about today. Just for the video, I will say that it's a part of the project titled Garden is an Answer in collaboration and support of Adam Mickiewicz Institute, and I'm a curator of this project, and I'm really happy that we are here in Warsaw at the Warsaw Observatorium of Culture, which is the partner organization, and that we can host you here today. And I will leave the floor to Paulina, and she will tell us about her experiences of founding and developing community gardens.
Hello. It sounds a little bit official with this microphone, but we have to record it, yeah? So I have to talk to the microphone, and it's really nice to meet you all and see you here. And I would like to tell you today about my experience as a practitioner, since I'm involved in this community garden movement for more than a decade at the moment, since 2013. As a practitioner, which means here in Warsaw, I've established and run a garden for about 7 years. And then I moved to another city where I've established another garden. And at the moment, I also started doctoral studies, which means that I'm also connected to theory of community gardens. And I started to research the governance model of those community gardens. And so maybe the title is not so appealing, the development plan at the moment, but I try to make it interesting for you, because I know you have, all of you, a lot of experience as far as Anya told me, and you already created communities yourself. But in the center of my focus, I think, is a community. And I would like to show you two things today. First thing is development plan of a space of a garden here in Warsaw that we never actually realized. It was created by an architect because we needed it, but it shows how the community transformed and how space wasn't sufficient anymore, and how community can transform in the time period, and what is needed for this community to flourish. And on the other hand, I would like to show you, on theoretical part, I would like to show you different models of governance, like what kind of rules and in terms of management of the garden are needed, and how it also transforms in time, because it's not like there is one way and for many years, like community all the time changes, so the governance models as well. So I start from the space, and as I told you, on the picture you see the common garden at the culture institutions, because I haven't told you that I'm focused, and both gardens that I've run were connected to the institutions. One at the Culture Center here in Warsaw, and the current one is at the university premises, which is very specific situations for garden and for community to be linked with institution. And because it gives something, but it takes away something as well. There is a price for it to be connected to the institution. So this photo is probably from 2015, 16, many years ago. And I show you the concept that was created around 5 years after starting the garden. And it was created by landscape architect. This garden was consisting of a plot as you see it, and it was mostly focused on food production, and that was the initial idea, to create a community and learn. But as you all know, gardens are more than food production, because they somehow create political and cultural foundation. And so, but in terms of space, it was at the playground of the culture house. This is the playground, and here is the plot. So it wasn't very big, but we could use this space around rather for recreational space, but our space was fenced here. So to give you a little bit of insight into the space, it was institutions, sorry, there is a spelling mistake, but institutions playground. It was a flat terrain, not far, I don't know the kilometers, sorry, I forgot to put it, but not so far from the center at the institution premises. The garden area was maybe 200 square meters, which is not much. But as I show you, lawns and trees, hammocks, and picnic tables we could use around. And we cultivated in boxes, raised beds, and we had bread oven, water and electricity at the premises, and storage for our tools. It was very easily accessible, also because of the institution, and we were fenced, as you saw, but it was very low fence. So we operated there with a huge success, you could say, from the point of view, sorry, of community, because we realized that there are a lot of people who were helping us with basic work like gardening, but as we delivered theoretical events and recreational events, here is, I think, permaculture lecture, we gathered lots of audience, and we realized this space is not enough for us anymore. And also, it's missing certain areas that are important for creating a community, really, and for keeping the community around this initiative. So this development plan was created by the same architect who was involved in designing the whole House of Culture previously, and our small plot as well. So she understood very well the idea of the place and the needs of community. So looking at this development plan, you could see certain areas. Here in this circle are the beds, so something that you saw in the original. So this is the whole original garden here. but maybe extended here. Maybe I show you another photo so you can, oh, I don't have it here, but to see the general plan, oh, maybe you see it here. Oh, so we decided to extend the whole garden with this area here, creating something we were missing. As you saw on the photo, we were missing workshop area with tables, educational part, and also we were missing roofed, like covered space. The summers were getting hotter and hotter, and it was really impossible to run workshops outside without roof. So the architect designed for us kind of roofed area here. It also designed, you can see a plan from the bird point of view. So here was supposed to be a roof with tables. Also, what was very beneficial for community here, that it was fenced with a very low fence, which means we were never separated from a larger community of the House of Culture. And it gave us also, it gave symbolic sign that you have to respect the space, and maybe you don't pick stuff, or maybe, yeah, we never had anything destroyed there. But on the other hand, people would be standing by this fence, here especially, because this is the old version, and here, looking like what we are doing and what's happening inside. So enjoying this way, like for weeks, for example, they will be passing by to the park area that was here, or to the, here was block of flat area, and here was House of Culture. So they had lots of things to do here, like going for a walk with a dog here, going to the House of Culture or home, and standing here talking to us somehow, and slowly becoming part of a community. So we decided that we wanted to be fenced from the playground, this development plan, but with a very low fence again. Yeah, so this is how it's supposed to look like. Yeah, another thing is we never had any place where we could exchange information on spot, like something very small, but this informational, very basic informational point was designed for us. And cooking area, we previously, for the 5 or 6 years, if we wanted to cook something, and it happened quite often, people loved this, we had to build kitchen ourselves, which means we had to bring tables, take them back, bring the whole kitchen equipment. It was very exhausting, although community would often help us with this. So, but we realized we need a table like this one in front of our oven. We couldn't run like this any longer, having so many participants. And here we have, in terms of water, we had just a tap. If we were washing something, we were like on our knees almost, or carrying stuff in bags to dry somewhere. So somebody designed us this table. So we really realized that in a community garden where you focus on food, those 3 areas, like growing area, kitchen area, and educational space, are kind of crucial for community. Fence, but low fence, and there were like 3 entrances for the place. We had a discussion to close it here from the side, because people coming from the House of Culture to the playground will be all the time going through our area, but we decided it is good to leave it like this, to leave the flow of people, especially that there was another entrance here. Here you can see again displays from the bird point of view. What was important and is important, I think, in a community garden is this external space that you could use. So you are never locked inside, but this gives you a lot of possibilities to do certain kind of events, like I don't know, foraging walks, or even collecting materials from the garden in the park, or even organizing walks where people could observe ecosystem around, because garden is never this little part, as a lot of you know, because I know some of you have a farm, or that it's always broader ecosystem. So I think this garden gave us this possibility to feel connected to this, always connected to the broader ecosystem, and always looking around. This plan was never developed for a certain reason, because gardens, firstly, initially, because there wasn't enough funds for this, but later it turned out that the garden changed and community changed. The leading person changed. Also, it wasn't me anymore, but someone else who had a different focus. And the space wasn't so necessary anymore, and nobody pushed it forward. And I show you in another presentation concerning management why it happened, and into what the garden changed. So the second thing I would like to tell you about is based on the research that I was doing with my colleague from university, and we were exploring relation between community gardens and cultural institutions, as I told you, in terms of the governance models. And because this is the same garden, and because community gardens are such a broad thing, and there is no really one model of community gardens. They are here described as hybrid parts of the city that can be built environment, that can be greenery, and they can be on the public spheres, private spheres, and then they can grow in a planned and unplanned way. So because also they are perceived as something that strengthens the community and can be as guerrilla gardening, a rebellious way of dealing in the city. On the other hand, some perceive them as a tool to gentrification in the space, because in the worst cases they can be used like this. So in this context, they also create a lot of governance approaches to rule the community inside and to cooperate with institutions as well. And as I also said, they are not only places that grow vegetables, they constitute cultural and political spaces. So our focus in this research were the connection with cultural, but not also with institutions, and that's my experience as well. So we are asking ourselves two questions. What are the factors that promote the functioning of community gardens in partnerships with institutions? And what are the governance models of community gardens? And also, how those models change in times. And to describe the governance models, you ask yourself questions like, who is taking decisions in those communities, in those gardens, and who is the one who is creating the certain rules and regulations in the gardens. And decision makers in the gardens can be community themselves, the people that are creating the garden, the managers. They can be external or somebody employed by cultural institutions. External organization, as very often it happens that, for example, NGO is paid or hired or somehow comes into collaboration with institution and is running the garden for the institution. Or it can be as well local authorities that have certain interest and can initiate a garden, for example, and start it. So just briefly, I show you the very theoretical 2 slides. Don't get scared because maybe it looks complicated, but together with my colleague, based on some research that had been done so far, people were researching those in gardens that are run or they are in connection with institutions. So there are 7 models, not only with institutions, in general, models of community gardens. So there are 7 of them. 3 of them on the first page here are top-down, means that the institutions are a leader somehow, or the institution have a voice. Yeah, and there are 4 governance models of community garden, but I think you could apply it not only to the gardens, to the initiatives as you know them probably as well. There are 4 different types of bottom-up. So the top-down can be a project or a garden managed and run only by professionals. So maybe people come to those gardens, but all the decisions and the people are totally dependent on the institutions and the professional. The second model is project managed by professionals, but run by paid workers. And in a way, the garden I told you about was this model. As in certain phases of its lasting, not all the time from the beginning till the end, because it was run by institution, but there were professionals paid by institution to run the garden, to operate it. And then there was another model is taught down with public engagement and driven by non-profit organization. I told you about this, like NGOs, for example, support the initiative. And then it can be the other one, the bottom-up projects, 4 of them, which is, let's say, a garden created by a community, not by an institution, but on a land, for example, of an institution, with funding of an institution, and with advice of institutions, so very much supported by institution. Then bottom up with professional help. So local community is running a garden, but with the help of professionals. That is paid help of professionals, but still it's community who takes the final decision. And then it could be also community with informal help, maybe not paid, maybe not, maybe more on the basis or friendly exchange. And the last one is when community takes all the decision. I would say maybe squatting. There is in Poland some such garden in squatting area, and it's totally run by community. They depend on the land. I mean, it's the land they squatted, it's the money they collect, and it's the program made by those people. So these are the 7 models, and those models can change in the phase of planning, implementation, and management. So it can start, for example, more as a bottom-up project and then end up totally different way or the other way around. It depends. So here is our examination. How we decided who is ruling in the institution. This is examination of the common garden that I showed you, which we described 4 phases of the garden, like planning stage and the implementation when we were building this garden, and then 2 phases that were different. We decided they were very different. I will tell you why. And we started to see, to look at certain factors here, like who is owning the land. SDK is the institution, it's the Polish abbreviation for this cultural institution. So this garden was totally dependent on the institution, which is a good thing in case of community garden very often, because the land problem is the main problem of, as you know, of most initiatives in the city. Water supply was coming from the institution. Funding was coming from the institution, but also organization, not a very informal organization, but managed to get funds along the way, but then it stopped, and it was again only the institution funding. Professional support. Here are the architect studio that research what the community needs and somehow created the place. Also, the collective did a lot of that was kind of hired to create the garden, delivered professional support, the collective in implementation phase, in management phase, and then it was another organization since 2022. Decision making was also done by institution collective. In implementation phase, it was already community created, so decision making involved community as well. So I just didn't explain you that here you can see the name of the governance model that was changing in time. So you look at this in this context, yeah, and then networking, like contacting broader audience, was dependent on the institution and organization. Physical hands-on help, firstly only institution and collective, then community joined, and then community diminished since 22, and it's mostly foundation because the community is now very small in this garden. And then program was created by our external organization, and the same with promotion. So as you see, this garden was created by institution with community help. Then it went to implementation phase, and it was the same. The management stage was also the institution with community help. And since 22, it's just the institution without community help. So because, as I told you, the community diminished. So what's the conclusion of our examination? Community gardens where the institution and cultural institution is involved are having often changing governance model, and they shifting from top-down model, where committee members do not, from top-down, I think I missed some words here. Sorry. But this is what I told you before anyway. They are shifting from top-down with community help towards top-down models where community don't have any influence anymore. And although institution facilitates its longevity because it's very huge privilege to have land secured in the town now, slowly with time it may limit the viability and community involvement somehow. So the example shows that without emphasis on building a community around gardens, it transforms into outdoor teaching room, which I've noticed in more cases than this one I've presented to you. And here you see that as the common garden, as a garden with a community, and this is how it operated in 2018. And it slowly changed because it's great as well, but it's totally different because the other organization that took over wasn't focused on food so much anymore and wasn't focused, I suppose, on community so much more, but transformed this space into educational permaculture plot where you can visit and look how those plants work together, but still is not very much community created thing. So now institution took over and they organized a lot of events, educational events, workshops, and so on. And community, maybe you wouldn't call it community. The people who would come to House of Culture come like to the garden laboratory more, or like to some other cultural events in a House of Culture. And but it's not a place created by community anymore. So thank you very much. The food production was going to the community. There was very basic rules in the garden that the food can be picked during the days the community meets. It's not like anybody can come anytime and pick food. So they were, I think, Monday and Thursdays, and then whoever was on spot could pick whatever was and have food. There are many factors because firstly, the community is never a solid thing. It all the time changes, and some people come and some people go, and some people started gardens themselves because they came to learn something and they initiated their own garden, so they disappeared. Sometimes a part of a community, there are people who don't have a job or have a baby and need to be somewhere with some people or have a depression. And then the situation changes and so they don't need this community anymore. And it can be also the case. But then other people come, yeah? So, but also I think maybe it's possible to give a community working with a community to give it more tools and more field for decision so they can somehow operate themselves. But I think it's very difficult situation for culture institutions because they have internal regulations as well, also responsibility. So I think it's a huge discussion how to do it, how community gardens could actually operate within a city, because I think it's been 10 years in Poland since this huge wave started. In Poland it was after 2010, and we see a lot of gardens disappear or transform, some other came, and how city can really, or institution can really support those gardens, and how to find ideal model. It's still a question. So how to give more, how to secure community, but how the community can get more say. So what to do when community, there is a year when the community is not stronger anymore, or if there is a leader that is missing for a moment, and you have to wait until the community rebuild itself and get some new people come and you get strength. And so how to fill this gap in between before it happens, so the garden don't get ruined anymore. And with institution, it's a secure way in a thing, because there are paid people who can keep the garden, who can maintain it, who can create certain program, but they should be open that for the community, for this moment where new people come, and how to let them decide. So.
But did you write the regulations
of the garden? Yeah. No, because people never wanted these regulations. Really, I've asked many times, and every year at least, because every year the community was a bit different, and they never wanted, because they like this freedom of being somewhere where those regulations are not so binding them. But I know every garden runs it different ways. Some people love regulation, maybe, and they need it. And in our community, they didn't want this kind of regulations.
We spoke today, no? We had this discussion that if you want to have horizontality anyway, you need regulations. And I think what could really help this community, even if it's fluid, community, when you have regulations, also can be fluid regulations. They don't need to stick to something, but you have a board, a member of the community is in the board, they are taking decisions, they are changing every year, maybe, but there are persons who take the responsibilities, and then you keep that going and growing.
Maybe we didn't need so much regulation because we were by the institutions. So they were already, institution itself had a lot of regulations, yeah, that the community had to apply it to in a way. Maybe that was a trap as well, yeah, because community was dependent on this regulation and became only receiving things from the institutions. Whereas I know that the garden that you visit tomorrow is more about bottom-up initiative, and they had to create everything from the beginning, like communication system, for example, how to send emails to many people, who decides, and does everybody need to know about everything, So for them it was harder, and in connection with institution, it's different. So.
But they still grow tomatoes, no? The garden that we will visit tomorrow.
Yes.
Even if it was harder, but they still grow tomatoes.
Actually not so much tomatoes, because there is no good sun for tomatoes, but they have a lot of vegetables.
They have food.
What I wanted to say that with the coalition, one of the organizations that I am part of, we are working now
secure for who owns the land?
The public authority, which is our authority. Like, you mean which land?
It's a public land, no, the land you're talking about.
I am not speaking about the land. I am speaking just that we are working on a law concept and
Okay.
advocate for it. We still don't have, like the civil society organizations are not allowed by law to govern and to administrate the public institution. So we want to change this now.
Can I answer any questions? Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I will ask Fanny, and the next presentation.
It's okay? No, okay, I prefer to stand. Okay. So maybe actually I'm gonna overlap with the previous presentation, and I also focus on the top-down and bottom-up approach. So maybe I also gonna give some hypothesis on how to secure this kind of places when it's threatened by, for example, the government that think that those places are like temporary space that we shouldn't protect, and so on. So I'm going to go a bit deeper on the topic. So I will try also to give in 20 minutes what I did for 3 years and actually more. So it might be a little bit too much dense in terms of the content, but you can ask as many questions as you want after. So a little bit of my background before we start. I think it's important because it's also connected to this topic. Why I choose to do a PhD about this. Maybe a bit crazy, but not just that. I actually did a master degree in urbanism, in urban study in France, but I did an internship in Brussels, and in there I worked in an NGO, environmental NGO, so maybe the Brussels people knows Natagora. And I get involved in how we needed to protect a space which was the Parc Josaphat, the Friche Josaphat, which was a wasteland. So I already studied the wasteland in the city, how we figure out how to protect those spaces when it's not really common, but it's not really public, it's not really private, and it's like with a lot of habitats, human habitats, refugees, or also environmental habitats. So how to take this in account and find a middle point to keep this space alive. And I think after this master degree, I was not enough in terms of this topic of, how to make things change. Because, there's this big thing in urbanism that we follow the law, but the law are actually not so great because they don't protect the communities. Basically, I'm going to try to use research. I mean, this is a bit of my goal. To kind of challenge the urban policies and trying to make a change also on how we build the future of our cities. So this is the title of my research. It's a bit long title, but you will see I will go through a bit of the main key, the key concepts of this big title. And I'm part of 2 universities, so the one in Krakow, which is the Jagiellonian University, and one in Brussels, which is UMOS. So it's also connecting perfectly the 2 case studies. Okay, so the main aim of this research project, is to investigate or really observe the functions and appropriation on actually how we take, how we live with the space within community gardens. And I choose community garden as like the focus point, but I actually observe how communal spaces are integrated into cities and how they are impacted by new transition, which is also the concept important. So if I stay here, it's fine. Yeah, okay. It's easier. So the socio-ecological transition is a concept that you might have heard about before. So it's defined between three key factors, which are the protection of the environment, the economic suitability, and the social cohesion. So it has to be a bit taken with carefulness, because this term is used and reused by a lot of governmental institutions. But it's interesting actually to take this concept and trying to reverse it, or trying to take it from the roots and explain it in a basic way. So the basic way is, when we take into account the socio-ecological transition, we can see that because of the impact of the climate crisis, people are actually changing mindset. So this is, for example, what happens in the beginning of the 90s. We saw a lot of activism with environmental projects, and people were thinking, okay, we need to do something for the nature, we need to do really something for our planet, and this is maybe why we are here today. And this push people to design co-created solutions within urban spaces. And if we take the community garden, it's also in this middle point between these three entities. So we have the food scarcity, which is like the self-sufficiency, which is not present in all of the gardens, but some of them, it can be an example. We have the community building, so people come together to really build something together and create a new community. And we have the environmental infrastructure, which is like contributing to the nature in the best way. So Paulina defined the community gardens before, and there's so many definitions. So this is the one I took in account, because even in this room, we have different perspectives, we are different people, and we define the community garden in different way. So I chose to pick this one. It was not easy. It took me a year to pick this definition, because I wanted to include everything what is about community gardens. So for me, it is, and for some of the research, it is natural laboratories. It is a place where we experiment with the nature. Yeah. And there is also this hypothesis about the natural third places. So also a concept that needs to be taken carefully. I decided to use this concept of third place. So for the people that don't know the third place, I can maybe explain. So it's basically not the first place, which is the home, and not the workplace, which is the second place. So it's a place in between. But nowadays there are more hybrid places, like co-working place, co-housing places, this kind of stuff. So the idea is to use this concept of third place to catch, the municipalities or the government that use already and categorize community garden in this kind of place, and try to secure in a different way. And creating a classification of natural third place. So basically, natural third place are space where we do some recreational activities and include the nature. So basically, this hypothesis is to, as I say, secure the community gardens, because they are like subjects of land use or building zone. So the idea is to critically assess that they are essential space into the urban infrastructure, and to foster the social bond that they produce, to also prevent the greenwashing that community garden can be subject of, and also to bridge the gap between the theory and the practices, because actually practitioners of community gardens sometimes use natural third places by themselves to define what they are, because the community garden is sometimes not enough. And I think we saw a bit of this with the presentation of Paulina, of space that are moving from one function to another, and they don't know how to be, how to call themselves. So this is a way to englobe all of these concepts. So now let's focus on the context between two cities that I choose as a case study. So we have Krakow and Brussels, and they are really interesting because they have some similarities and differences. So, for example, we have some differences in terms of their socio-political context, in terms of their landscape differences, and policy relevance. So if I focus only, for example, on the policy relevances, so in Krakow, we see that it's more a top-down approach. Now you know the concept, so I can go on. And in Brussels, it will be more a bottom-up approach, mostly. A little bit of history. So if we check on the urban agricultural history of Brussels and Krakow, we can see that there is a lot of difference. So in Krakow, it's mostly a urban agriculture that passed through the allotment garden, as we saw this morning. Actually, Poland was the country that's the most produced allotment garden in every history. Like, it was really huge. So we have still this kind of culture and this tradition of keeping the allotment garden alive. But we saw that in Krakow it appeared in 2010, as explained by Paulina. And in Brussels it's much earlier. So we can see that the first community garden was in 1976, so it's not at all the same. And this is also explained by the differences I explained before, so the socio-political context, cultural, and etc. So a little bit more about my research. So I divided this big question in 3 stages. The first stage is to actually identify where are the community gardens in both cities. So really map all the gardens and trying to find them, because, for example, in Brussels, it's really hard to put them in a map, you know, especially when it's illegal, but it's just like mouth talking and you're like, oh yeah, maybe it's in that street. So this is like part of the process. The stage 2 was the analysis of the socio-ecological transition attitude, so how the mindset that I explained at the beginning impacts the way we build the community garden, how they really evolve over time, how the practices also are different or similar between those cities. And the last stage is really to showcase that those initiatives are basically benefiting the garden and the community together, so in symbiosis. So as I say, for this I prepared for the first stage a map, which was a participatory mapping, so I was really involving the people to map on online mapping the gardens, and then create kind of a typology on okay, what type of garden we have in both cities. Then we have the second stage, which is the selection of the case study and really going in a qualitative manner, so interview, ethnographical observation, and an experimental project. We come back after. And at the end, the third stage is really building those recommendations to touch the urban policies. So right now I'm in the recommendation process, so I'm just writing, basically. So little bit to showcase the results that I get. So we have 20 community gardens, actually 21, because I heard 3 days ago that there were a new community garden being built. So it's like, you see, really important to involve the people within the mapping, because the space is really evolving over time. And as Paulina said, you know, sometimes community garden appear and disappear, like it's so complex entity to point out. So you see, actually in 1 year there's 4 community gardens being created, so it's going quite fast. And for the case of Brussels, it was much much harder because there were much more. And also the data from the municipality, which is from 2018, were not really accurate. So it was like, it was 6 years ago, and in 6 years we can see that a lot of things can happen. Like in 1 year, 4 community gardens appear in Krakow, so you can imagine. So I also created these typologies, as explained. So I just selected 4 types of typology because it can be really diverse and complex, but we can study the community gardens with their governance structures, as Paulina explained, the location factor, so if they are located on a rooftop, in a courtyard, in a roundabout, in a wasteland, in a park, and etc. Their function, so why they are being created, and finally their emergence reason, why people really want to create their community garden. And this led me to select actually 2 case studies in both cities. So I selected two case studies in 2 community gardens in Krakow, based on the typology of the governance structure. So the top-down and bottom-up. On the bottom-up example, we have the Salvatore Garden, and on the top-down, we have the Ogród Garden, which you can see already visually the difference. For the case of Brussels, I selected, depending on the socio-ecological factor or more socio-demographic factor, because it was really hard actually to collect data about why the garden has been created. So the motivation, you need to go already in the ground. So I decided to pick 2 different districts, one that is XL. XL is really like upper class. You have the commission people that come in the gardens, which is the case, which is the case of the Grémoineau garden. So it's like really diverse culturally. So you have people from a lot of countries, so Italy, Spain, France, Belgium, like everywhere. But it's mostly white people, and they are trying to create a new kind of structure within the garden. And La Parcelle Garden, which is located in Anderlecht, which is more middle class or lower, and it's a district that is really diverse culturally. But we can see that actually in the garden it's not that diverse, even though people want to involve them. We can see it's a bit similar to Grémoineau, so it's mostly white people from upper classes that already have a house and try to create something else. So I conduct interviews, long, in-depth interviews with with all of the case studies. This is the example of my observations. And I also conduct the ethnography observation. So I don't know if you know about ethnography, but I went to the garden for 1.5 to 2 months in each garden and observe how people are involving into the space, what kind of practices they are developing. And basically we can see that there is different actors involved within the community garden. So we have the community members, of course. We also have the public actors, so the government or municipality entities. We also have some experts that, like me, sometimes come in the garden and just study, and we can see some collaboration with universities. And we also have associations that are really trying to use the space in different ways. So a little bit of results that I get from all of those case studies. These are the benefits that people really develop during the interviews. So we can see that community gardens are actually a space that give the access to the nature. So people can really use that space when they don't have a garden, go there and really, they say it's better than a park because the park you cannot like put your hand on the grass and do whatever you want with the nature. It's also an educational tool. As I say, there's also like universities, but also some schools sometimes with children that come on the space and really work with the nature. And we also have knowledge exchange, it's a bit linked. We also have the social bonds, the experimentation. So I observed that there is actually a lot of innovation happening in the gardens, and we don't even talk about. And I'm pretty sure, like, yeah, so many great ideas that could contribute to the resilience of the urban spaces for our future. They talk also about the structure, that's the fact that they can structure the place the way they want, so it can be with individual plots or like with common plots. And finally, rules, which also Paulina talked about, so I'm not gonna go. And the challenges, so sometimes the garden is not really accessible, because there are some fences, because you need to be a member to be included in. The uses actually are not really defined, so because a garden is seen as temporary, sometimes the municipality can give the space for like 3 years. For example, I think this is the case of Most Farm. And then, you know, think that it's a building zone, so they are waiting for investors. So it's still, the uses are different. There's problem in terms of inclusivity, as I explained before. In the case of Brussels, the inclusivity was not so great. There is also problem in long-term involvement, political tension, and social issues. For example, like refugees that come on the community gardens and that are like pushed away, or etc. So a way to include those benefits and cope with the challenges is making those spaces more equitable, so more accessible to the people, and also build them on transparency and trust, and use them as ground testing. So really let the people experimenting with the space without thinking that, oh, we need to put rules, they need to do that and all. No, it's just trusting the people that the space will be fine, and also that it brings social resilience. I think we talk about it, the resilience concept, so I'm not going to go back on this. That it brings some community empowerment, and also that they should be adapted to the environment and the specific local needs. So it's not because I know a successful case in Krakow that's going to work in this specific district in Brussels. So it has to be adapted to the local needs of the community. Finally, this is the last project of my research, is the community garden on the campus that I see myself as a kind of a catalyst, because I was just being the mediator between the community and the university. So especially like in terms of bureaucracy, it can be complicated, but I was trying, and I don't speak Polish, so imagine. But I was trying to fill this gap and trying to bring a space to the community that wanted this space. So the community is based on students, teachers, but also inhabitants of the neighborhood. So it's located on this triangle area in the campus, and it's been launched in June. And the way we created it, it's based on a participatory approach, so a co-design. So we were launching workshops with the people. The workshops were open to really everyone. We did one in English and one in Polish to be inclusive. And we gave that map. So it's basically the space. I show you the triangle, but actually the community garden is just this area. And people needed to like draw or write how they imagine the future of that space. And yeah, so this is what people did. I think it's pretty nice. And We also created a little exhibition about those maps. Also, it gave the opportunity to people that couldn't join to also draw their map and add it on the wall. And finally, we launched with a conference because we are the university, so we need to be a bit scientific, you know. So I actually created my first conference. That's because of this. It was nice, and it was about, you know, the sensibilization of what are community gardens. And we did the opening, and during the opening, we did different activities. So, of course, gardening. But also artistic practices with children. There were little concerts, little talks about the garden, and so on. So I think that's all for me. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I have a question, because I'm very curious about the Brussels garden. If you examine the longevity, like the endurance of the community, like how long they lasted. There are 200 gardens there, but either they are old gardens or they are gardens that just emerged. The gardening movement, as you said, has been there for 40 years now. So how about the gardens? Have you found a garden that would be 40 years old?
Yeah, actually, yeah. There is some community gardens that are really old. And there is one garden, it's a bit hybrid because like a little bit of an allotment garden. It's located in Uccle. I don't remember the name of the garden, I'm sorry, but I went there because one of my friend dad is there for like years. So I went to this garden and I saw, but they are a little bit more private, but they let also the space for some events time to time. So it's still community based. So yeah, there is still gardens, not so many.
And not by institution. They are
Yeah, they are like still working on the bottom up. They tried sometime to be partner with the municipality for funds, but most of the time it's on their own.
But I think the history of the allotment gardens in Brussels is also a bit different than here. I think this morning we spoke about the allotment gardens in the farm we visited, and it was with a house and a small piece of land. I think in Brussels and in Belgium in general, historically it has been just a small piece of land.
okay.
Where
Now the house and
people would put like a small cabin for the tools and then illegally sleep in it. But it was more part of, and often it was part of also, I think, I'm not sure of that, with the Industrial Revolution, when small labor houses were built, it was also like a garden included and everybody had a piece of land. I think historically, a lot of the gardens in Brussels are still coming from that period. The garden where I'm part of, I think it already exists since, I think, the 60s or something. And it has changed. Yeah, and it has changed from an allotment garden that is really divided in small plots to something that is now more of a permaculture community garden over the years. So.
You didn't spoke too much about governance structure.
Yeah, because she already talked about it, so I was like, you know, I think it's enough. Governance structure.
The governance model of the gardens, maybe in Brussels.
But you said they are mostly bottom up. Yeah, like this governance.
Yeah, but it's not enough just to know that
You want details.
regulations, who are taking the decisions, this type of questions.
It's a big question. It's a big question, especially because I'm still in the process of, you know, analyzing all this data, those interviews, because I focus on it only in Krakow, this top-down and bottom-up approach. But as I see it, for now, is that the top-down structure doesn't help to make the community alive. So a little bit like Paulina was explaining, is mostly You know, they are the people that are getting involved, but they are a bit used as workers, you know, for like sustaining the garden. And actually the green local management in Krakow, they told me, they were like, yeah, we lose people because, you know, green spaces in Krakow is too much. So I was like, okay, that's a bit strange, because maybe people want to do things, you know, in this garden, or just like walking for them, and they are not paid, of course.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if the institution, okay, sometimes it helps, because I can imagine that in terms of, you know, promotion or build a positive image, you know, within the important topics right now, like climate change, etc. It's a positive impact for the institution, or it might be. But on the other hand, if the institution doesn't put too much effort and really invest in people that will run it, that will take these bonds to really create this relation with the community, that it will not happen, you know, only because the institution have this umbrella, you know, or has this umbrella under, or the garden is under this umbrella of the institution. And when it really comes from the community, then maybe I'm just wondering that, okay, this process, as you both said, of decision making, you know, how to deal with it, might be more complicated. But on the other hand, maybe then there is this basic root of the community that really that is able to really, you know, take care of the structure actually.
This is what I said with the one of my slides about the transparency and trust. I think once it's top down, there's not this, you know, exchange. Maybe there is some participatory way of emergence. You know, they try to integrate the people in a co-design way, but then after that, that's all. You know, most of the time don't include what people want, what people say, what people need, and they don't really trust on what people can do, and they don't let the space for experimenting and expressing themselves, you know. I think that's really the problem, the top-down approach. Because bottom-up approach is challenging, because you start, you don't have the money, you don't have the structure also, like the La Parcelle garden, the Siegen garden, they need to be a cooperative legally to be able to take this piece of land. So when you are like, you know, coming from a foreign country and you want to do this kind of thing, you can't, because the bureaucracy is like a big limit. So there's also this problem of barriers that you know, decrease the partnership between people and the high entity, let's say, municipalities.
We think a bit on how often urban design is also done, and it's like sometimes they're like, yeah, we're doing a participative design, and we're asking 2-3 people, or they put a letter in the mailbox, and then the people that actually already have time, they can come, but then in the end often the thing is made like onto even skate parks, you know, and that they're like, that people are saying like, yeah, this is obviously made by architects.
Yeah.
And maybe another thing that I wanted to share also, and I think it's just maybe important in general, if we're working in a group together, we can point out some trigger points. Thank you for the presentation. But I think the word experts, it's a bit dangerous, I find, because I find that everybody is actually an expert, and this is actually the reason why we don't give the authority to people, common people, or whatever. Everybody is an expert in their field. You know, one is an expert in migrating, or with the fact of having to migrate. The other is an expert in emotional guidance. The other one calling out people with a university degree that are doing research and expert is a bit tricky from a decolonial point of view, maybe also. And I think it's really an important part to exactly make participatory work together. Yeah, because I think this is really important, working with migrating communities, working with a lot of people. Like, yeah, I am often quite pissed off with the participatory but what does it actually mean, you know, like, and how deep does this participatory go? And I think it comes also back to like, yeah, I think humans are a bit, and I think this is what I also like a lot in what you were saying. It's like, actually we are so much deprivatized from how our environment looks. If you're lucky, maybe you can design your home or your kitchen or your room, but then you are already lucky. But then further than this is really like an administrative mess. You have to be an expert or a certain degree onto something. So I think this is also something that, yeah, that I hope to.
Just to point out, if you're done.
No, go ahead.
Just to point out this slide about experts. I actually didn't take it out, but I was also confused with the categorization. It was a slide that I did for a grant. You know, I need to take money sometimes. And they asked me to categorize like the actors, and I was like, okay, but you know, you can be like a gardener, but you can be an expert as well, and you can be like part of the municipality, which is the case. Like, you don't have to be categorized in a category. So that's a little bit tricky, especially in research when they ask you to be like, you know, structured.
For the group, I think it's important to change our language also in certain things, and maybe if we hear things that might be, I hope also you can say me sometimes, you know, saying something that is misogynist, or because it's this that is also creating common community and language and changes in how we generate society also.
But I think that in the community gardens, it's mostly happens that people learn from each other horizontally, in a way, and they agree with this model. So in that sense, the expert and professional is a little bit, it's not existing there in a way.
But there is a difference with professional. It's something that somebody that is paid for a certain. But an expert is also like somebody has an expertise in something, and we can debate what is a so-called expertise, and it's also what they use to exclude a lot of people in actually decision making. That's why I'm asking. That I'm more talking about the word, like what does it mean to say like, okay, the people doing a study are the experts so-called. Well, actually, each one is their expert in their own.
It's a question of creating something that is elitistic somehow, because then you have someone that is supposed to be
knows what or how,
or to be upper than the others, you know, because of something.
But there is another topic connected to what you said, and I would like to ask Fanny as well about aesthetics of the garden in Brussels, for example, because they are they have long lines there, because sometimes they how do we loosen our perception a little bit? And also I wanted to ask you what's dominating aesthetics in Brussels of the gardens you saw, how they are designed.
It's hard to generalize, I think. I think it's more like this messy anarchist way in Brussels. Yeah, it's I saw.
I wouldn't expect.
Have you been to Brussels?
The big one.
It's like you should come.
It's quite messy
Yeah.
from some point
It's
of
also
view.
interesting, the gardens that are owned by the region, by the government, more and more the region is trying to homogenize them and put in rules and say, okay, you can have a cabin, but it has to look like this, and that everything is the same with the same fences. And so it's also evolving slowly, unfortunately, into something a bit more acceptable.
Standardized.
Yeah.
It's being standardized slowly.
Yeah.
But I think it's also about the materials, because when you do it, when it's like super design, I already think that, okay, it's more like you go to the shop, you know, you buy the piece of wood that is already cutted, you know, that it's a kind of, you know, the standard design IKEA style a little bit, you know, that you only make it like Lego from already, you know, bought materials, and then it's something different when you have to reuse, you know, and think about the circulation of materials as well.
Yeah.
So then you, even as we went today to the farm, you know, and you see that there are pieces of carton between the plants, you know, and it might look like, you know, messy in the first moment, but if you know that it's because of a certain reason, or if you build a construction to support cucumbers growing or tomatoes, and then it doesn't have to be, you use pieces of wood that you can find, you know, in an area, but it's not perfectly cutted, you know. So it's also a kind of, you know, like this mindset, how we use this material and what is also behind it. So if we want to have like really super designed space, but also, you know, from the materials, that it's a question, you know, how it is produced.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the city you have everything. Your apartment, it's a square. Your office, it's a square. Your street is a square. So everything is like...
Yeah, and even if you have a green area, I mean, if, for example, right now in Warsaw, there will be this, near the Palace of Culture, and between this new museum that we are also discussing in a moment, there will be like a central square, but all the green area is designed for this space, right? So, and it's at the end, the involvement of the city community is based on consultations on the project of designing this space.
I wanted to ask if you have any data. If those bottom-up gardens are public property, how many of those bottom-up gardens are on public property?
So I studied this actually in my second paper. I don't remember exactly the number, the percentage, but if I check on my computer, I can tell you exactly. For the case of Krakow, I need to check. I don't want to tell you something that I'm not sure, you know. So, but I studied this because for creating this typology, I did the desk research. So I went on I went on the internet and on Facebook group and all to look exactly what are community gardens and how they are built, what their content, when they emerged, who is there, you know. So I did this like long table. It took 3 months just for Brussels. So I can tell you on this.
But with Krakow, it might be there mostly on the public land, the city land, yeah? Because,
Not really, because like for the case of the bottom up, it's on a private land. It's actually the story is a guy that doesn't want to take care of his land, and he knows someone from this garden that get the idea. So he gave just like an agreement of like, okay, you can take the space. I don't use it. He's a really odd guy, so he
But
doesn't
the
care.
municipality of Krakow has this program of initiating the gardens and helping citizens
Yeah.
to initiate, so they search for land.
Yeah, that's
For those
public
who want to
for sure.
establish, yes.
That's public for sure.
So that's why many of them have new public city land for this reason.
In Brussels, we have a garden that was like made by a migrant community between two roads, and they have been planting on there, and then the city came and take it away because the whole community, like the people living around, they claimed back this land, and now they're still farming on this. But it's really like most remote. It's like between two streets, like just like between two streets in the middle. They started planting, and then now it's like you can use the space for a longer time. So it's public space, but it's really like claimed by.
I really like that story. Actually, I was thinking to use it as a case study because it's also asked this common space, like the street as a common space, because the streets are used by cars, like tram and all, people walking, but we don't stay and build with the street or do something in there. So I think this is really good question as well, like where to put the community garden and on which level.
Actually, I was seeing today, like between the tram lanes, there were like grown grass, and I said, why not to have grown tomatoes there?
Yeah, nobody would claim the land anyway for years, so secure.
Thanks for your comments, by the way, because normally I have just conferences and research type of structure, and I love